buzzer, banks it in! He banks in the
have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang! Oh, what a shot!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Scotty Talks NBA. I'm your host at Scotty Drown on all social media platforms. You can find me at that name there, at Scotty Drown. As you know, we are streaming to you live right off the DSM Media's YouTube page, Twitter page, and Facebook page. And today I actually have a very special guest. You guys may know him from Twitter at Harrison_Grimm. Harrison, welcome to the show, my man. As well as on Twitter, he puts out a lot of good content. He's also a basket blogger for the Liberty Ballers. You can find them at Liberty_Ballers. That's of SB Nation. Harrison, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great, Scotty. It's great to be back on. I appreciate the invite. Lots of exciting storylines to talk about with this team, especially as of late, and I'm ready to dive into it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So just a precursor for everybody. We will be talking a bunch of Sixers talk today. We're going to stick to the Philadelphia 76ers. But nonetheless, I'm happy to have you here as well, my man. Everybody out there, be sure to get involved in the comments, like the video, share it out to help support DSM Media, help us grow. But nonetheless, let's jump right into this, Harrison. Where I want to start, I think this is a good starting point just to get kind of a foundation of where you stand with the Sixers. So what are your overall thoughts on the Sixers' performance this season? Especially, after the All-Star break, they've kind of got off to a hot start, especially on this road trip. But where do they lie as far as your original expectations? Are they outperforming them? Are they falling under them? Where are you at with the Sixers right now?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty much where I expected them to be. I kind of expected them to be around the top three, and right now they're third in the conference, kind of battling for second even.
Yeah.
So if you take away the first 5 games of the season, I think everybody would be really happy with where the Sixers are. They've really done well. They had to dominate in this early portion of the season, and they did just that. Now, obviously, we're in a tougher stretch, and they just finished up this road trip, 4-1, 5-game road trip. That's what you want to see out of this team. And I think that just watching this team, I get the frustration where some fans don't like how they kind of coast sometimes, especially on defense, especially with rebounding. But we've seen them really just kind of cruise through games. And before you know it, they actually win most of these games. And I think that really is a testament to their talent and everything, and how they can hopefully flip a switch when it comes to the postseason.
Yeah, I love that answer because it kind of takes us right into the next question, which is just going to be regarding that road trip. And it's an interesting concept because I feel like this road trip was very eye-opening for Sixers fans. You obviously had a bunch of Sixers fans kind of migrating over from the Eagles Super Bowl run, trying to catch up with where the Sixers have been, maybe haven't watched a ton of Sixers basketball this season. So after the All-Star break was a nice chance for Sixers fans to actually catch up that weren't paying attention much at the beginning of the season. But I wanted to ask you, kind of riding off your points there, do you think the success on this road trip was bigger for the Sixers team in building confidence within themselves, or do you think it's bigger for the media and the fans out on the outside looking in just to kind of believe more in this team? Who would you say had the bigger impact on?
Yeah, I think ultimately all the team cares about at this point in the season, I think, is two things. One is getting ready for the postseason, and with the schedule strength and everything, the difficult schedule strength, this is a really crucial moment for this team to kind of gain some momentum, because whoever they face in the first or second round, these are going to be difficult teams. The Eastern Conference is very difficult. So getting good results against competitive teams is crucial. You want to go in with some type of rhythm, and especially with Joel Embiid, he's a rhythm guy. You kind of saw him the first game or two outside of the All-Star break. He was kind of struggling, and I think rhythm is really important for him. And then I also think that the other half of it is this team really wants to finish well within the conference standings and everything. And they have a chance to even get the second seed, which is a pretty big deal if the second round matchup theoretically would be the Boston Celtics. You definitely want home court advantage for
Yeah.
that team. So I think 50% of it is making sure that they finish strong and finish hopefully with a favorable matchup in round 1 and 2. And then the other half is really just getting those reps in before you face whoever you're going to face in round 1.
Yeah. So just a real quick question in between here. What would you say would bode better for the Sixers just from a postseason standpoint? Getting a tougher first round matchup, or kind of getting lucky and getting a nice first round matchup and then moving in and having that advantage in the second round? Like, I guess there's this argument going on right now. Would you rather have the tougher road just so you know they're prepared once they get to the second round? Or would you rather get the easiest road possible, like we've seen in past years where they just haven't been able to take advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I get everyone kind of wants to have that debate, but the Eastern Conference is just loaded, man. And
It's tough all around, right?
it really is. I mean, you're facing one of the New York Knicks, the Miami Heat, the Atlanta Hawks, or the Brooklyn Nets. And
Yeah.
I get Brooklyn just traded all those stars, but even they're a deep team. They're gonna cause you some problems. And
Yeah.
I think it ultimately just comes down to, like, if it was my personal decision and my personal opinion, it's the easiest road possible. I get everyone's like, we should fear nobody, but if you can take the easy road, you should take the easy road, especially if you're going to face the Boston Celtics in the next round. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with Chile here. Give us the Hawks or the Heat. The Nets are interesting because they just have so much depth at one of the best places to have depth, which is 3-and-D wings. And it seems like wings always give the Sixers issues as well. But the Heat, that one's an interesting one because you can get kind of payback for last year. But I don't know if any of these teams are teams that you want to ask for in the first round, especially not the Knicks. Moving on from that, a guy that we haven't mentioned his name yet so far in this show, but Doc Rivers. He's kind of a polarizing figure in the Sixers fan base. But I think he's actually done a pretty good job this season from my own personal opinion. I'm curious on your thoughts of Doc, his rotation management, the way he fits guys in. I see the smile there, so I'm interested in your thoughts.
You're setting me up for failure with this question, because any time that you say Doc's not too bad, or praise Doc, your mentions just get lit up, and by your mentions I mean mine. But
Yeah,
you're setting me up for failure here. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to Doc Rivers, I definitely think that there's some things that he could have done better, especially with the backup center situation. It's kind of insane how long Montrez lasted as their main option. He definitely got, probably in my opinion, too much of a chance to be their solidified backup center. Obviously, now they're going with Paul Reed, to Doc's credit, which is the right decision. So stuff like that. I think that also the rotations as a whole have been kind of messy. You're starting to see them gravitate away from the all bench unit, which just gets clobbered in pretty much all matchups, apart from a few every blue moon. So from that standpoint, I definitely think there's things that Doc is stubborn about that he could definitely do better with. But that being said, this team has had injuries to two key guys, Tyrese Maxey and James Harden, during lengthy stretches, give or take like 10 games. And they're in competition for the 2 seed. You could say the 1 seed. I think the 1 seed is unrealistic at this point. But they're going to finish probably 2 or 3. And I think everything like all factors considered, I think Doc has done his job. And another thing that fans might point out is the lack of urgency and the lack of hustle that this team kind of shows sometimes. But there's only so much screaming that Doc Rivers can do before you eventually look at the players to show that. So if I had to give Doc Rivers a grade, it would probably be a B minus. I think he's done pretty okay, but there's definitely some things that he should change, and I think you'll see those changes, especially with the rotation as they inch closer to the postseason and the rotation shortens up.
No, I think B minus, C plus. I think that's about fair for what Doc has done this season, given the adversity that he's faced But along with those little instances with Paul Reed, we could have just tried Paul Reed a long time ago, right?
Yeah.
And maybe that's partially Daryl Morey's fault for giving him the ammunition to use in a guy like Trez and even Dedmon, who they brought in of late. But looking at another piece of that rotation that we're talking about with Doc Rivers, a lot of talk about Tyrese Maxey back and forth between the bench and the starting unit. I'm interested in your thoughts here as far as, obviously Maxey's been on a heater of late, especially during this road trip. But is it as simple as him just starting with the starters? Like, we still saw him in the late moments, in the late games with the starters anyways, even when he was coming off the bench. Is it as simple as boosting his confidence by getting him in that starting lineup for you? Or what exactly did you see there as far as his turnaround so far?
That's something that I've really thought about since we've seen this resurgence from him during the past like 5 games or so. He's averaging like 26 points per game on ridiculous efficiency since he's been reinserted back into the starting 5. And it's really difficult to say. I think some of it might be confidence. I think Tyrese views himself as a starter, as he should. So I think maybe that's part of it. But, I'm still trying to figure it out. But if I had to point out one specific thing, I think it's just playing alongside talented guys. I think, and that's kind of a cop-out answer, but when Tyrese is the guy on those bench mob units, he's being guarded by the number 1 perimeter defender. When you have him next to Joel Embiid and James Harden, that's not the case. And in fact, like his speed, like Joel and James play at such a slower rate. His speed like really bails them out sometimes of these late clock situations. So I think it's from a fit and from a talent perspective, having those guys around him just makes it easier for him. And that's why I think you're seeing his numbers start to climb up. And I also think that injury and everything, it took some time to kind of get his feet back under him, get his rhythm back. We also can't discount that. So I really think it's a combination of things.
Yeah, I like the ending part there that you added in as well. Just about the injury, because he is a guy that is, I don't want to say he's reliant on his speed and his athleticism, but to an extent, when he's driving down the lane, that is kind of what you're relying on. So to get that confidence back, even just in your foot to land and plant, I think is a huge thing for him. About the reasoning why he ultimately went to the bench was not even about his offensive struggles. It was more or less about the defensive struggles. Do you think that that's been kind of overblown? Or do you think it's talked about right about where it is as far as him being kind of a detractor on the defensive end? Where are you at with Maxey as a defender?
That's interesting because the advanced numbers, like defensive rating and offensive rating with these lineups, actually shows that the starting 5 with Maxey is better defensively than the starting 5 with Melton, which is weird. But when it comes down to Tyrese's defense, that's always going to be suspect. That's probably going to be the next area of his game that he should look to really excel in. But the thing about Tyrese is sometimes he's going to get burnt. But he shows effort. He has the wingspan to make some plays. So it's all about just utilizing that speed and that wingspan. So that's what's going to come down to. And I think that move, I think the Sixers were kind of looking ahead and fearing like, okay, we very well might face Boston either in the second round or the conference finals if they get there. And that's a potential matchup where you kind of fear the Celtics picking on Maxey and Harden as well. Now that being said, I am someone who believes you should start your 3rd best player on your team, and that's what they're doing now. So and the play backs it up as of late with Maxey. You see the numbers, you see the results, them going 4-1 in this 5-game stretch. So until Maxey gives me a reason not to start him, I'm going to keep starting him. And if and when that time comes, it probably won't be until the postseason, and then you can kind of reevaluate things. But for now, your goal should just be winning the games that you can and also getting rest to your guys like James and Joel, which they've been doing.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. And I've always been on the side of Maxey starting. My biggest thing with Maxey, he's a young player. I just didn't want to pigeonhole him into like that 6-man spark plug role, right? He's a guy who I think can be a little bit better, a little bit more consistent, and a starter in the NBA. And I really just didn't want to kind of pigeonhole him into that role to where that's what he develops into. I want him to develop into a starting caliber guard in the NBA. So ultimately, that's why I wanted to keep him in the lineup. And to your point, he's the third best player on this team. Now, something interesting that has arose with the starting lineup as well. Obviously, Jalen McDaniels gets that start against the Indiana Pacers. He has 20 points, upwards of six, maybe even 8 rebounds in that game. I can't remember exactly, but he was rebounding the ball well. He's scoring the ball well, playing really well with the starting unit. What are your thoughts on Jalen McDaniels' role, his fit? There's a lot of people saying that he should start. I in reality think it makes sense. He does fit exactly what the Sixers could use in their starting lineup. But at the same time, we have 17, 16 games left in the season. You don't want to move around things that much, right? What are your thoughts on Jalen McDaniels' role, where he fits into the playoff rotation, and ultimately what you would do with him if you're Doc?
Yeah, and I get all the excitement around Jalen McDaniels. He's looked phenomenal. I mean, he's been in a limited role. He hasn't really had too much of an offensive role, just getting here on the fly and just inserting him as quickly as they could. But we saw the potential in that Pacers game where he started, played about 30 minutes. And I get the excitement. I mean, you look at like the past power forwards that have been around Joel Embiid. You have Dario, you got Tobias, you have Niang. Like all those guys aren't very athletic. Tobias
Right.
is somewhat athletic, but he's not bouncy like Jalen McDaniels. So it's
Yeah.
this whole new dimension. And you saw the defensive potential between him and Joel and also him and Paul Reed. So
Yeah.
I understand the excitement. I get that people want to give this guy a larger role. But I'm with you in the standpoint that they are over 2/3 of the way through the season.
Yeah.
Benching either PJ Tucker or Tobias Harris at this point is just going to cause confusion and probably do more harm than good. But that being said, I think beyond this season, Tobias is going to have one more year left on his deal. Everyone kind of knows this is the point where if a Tobias deal is going to happen, it's probably going to happen this summer or during next season. I think then you could seriously have a conversation about him becoming your new power forward. But for this season and this upcoming playoff run, barring injury, I think he's best suited in a bench role. And I think the Sixers are going to go eight men deep probably, and he should definitely be one of those players for sure.
Yeah, I love that answer because I think the thing with Jalen McDaniels that we have to recognize as fans is that he is part of the future as well. And I think that's something that he may have been able to solidify with a performance like that in his first start with the Sixers. But it's not something, I guess just off the top of my head, I would probably move PJ to the bench if I had to choose just fit-wise for the starting lineup. But then you have to ask yourself, what use is PJ like off the bench, right? He's a glue guy, so he needs to glue that starting lineup together. But then moving Tobias to the bench unit, while I think Tobias, if he started the season in a 6-man role, it could be beneficial. But he's a guy, confidence, rhythm as well. He's another player like that where you just don't want to throw that off too much. And benching him ultimately could really deteriorate his confidence more than what you need going into the playoffs. So I'm with you there. Just staying on the playoff rotation front. Who do you look at on this team? Obviously, McDaniels is a guy you think has solidified his role. What about the guys like Shake, Paul Reed, obviously the backup center, Daniel House? He's been playing better of late. Who else on this bench, this bench unit, do you think has solidified their place as far as being a part of that playoff rotation? You said eight or nine guys, I believe you said in there.
Yeah. So I mean, that's such a difficult question to answer just because I think it's really dependent on the matchup at this point. But 2 guys I know for sure are going to get, I'll say 2.5. 2.5 guys that I know for sure are going to be in the rotation, regardless of whoever they're playing, is going to be Jalen McDaniels, who we touched on, DeAnthony Melton, and I think Paul Reed. I think at this point in the season, they haven't gone to Deadman. They didn't go to Deadman even when they blew out who was it, the Minnesota Timberwolves last night.
Yeah.
So the half is Paul Reed in that. But I think those guys have solidified themselves. Now, if it was up to me, I think Shake has played so well this season in a limited role, and I think he's really gotten overlooked not just by fans, but by media. He's just had a career year efficiency. He's been really good. He's kind of been in and out of the rotation, which has been questionable, at least for me. So he's someone that if DeAnthony Melton is struggling or if they're just looking for a spark plug, I think he would probably be the next guy up to get minutes. Beyond that, you're probably looking at Niang and Daniel House. Now, if it's the Celtics, I think Niang is not playable in that type of environment. If it's the Milwaukee Bucks, I think that's a different story. I kind of think he can hold his own at least for like 10 minutes. I'm hesitant saying that.
Enough to see if he can hit a shot or two.
Yeah, but I mean, he's had success even against Giannis. Like it's one of those weird things, like Tobias guarding Darius Garland, that for some reason it just kind of works. So it's really dependent on the matchup. But I think the guys that you can definitely pencil in for getting rotation minutes are Jalen McDaniels, DeAnthony Melton, and Paul Reed to a certain extent.
Yeah, so a pretty strong 8-man rotation there, a versatile 8-man rotation, if you ask me as well. So just kind of turning the page on the rotation there. James Harden, right? Let's talk about him. He's been outstanding this season. Arguably MVP caliber, depending how you look at it, I guess. I'm of the stance where if Embiid's an MVP candidate, then the other guy can't be. But I don't know how you look at that. Thoughts on James Harden this season? Thoughts on James Harden specifically after the All-Star break? He looks refreshed. Maybe a little bit feeling of disrespect as far as his game and where he stands. What are your thoughts on James Harden right now as we get closer to the postseason?
Yeah, I thought going into this season that we would kind of see a bounce back from James Harden compared to what we saw during the last half of the season last year. Yeah. And he's honestly exceeded my expectations. He's shown this burst that he was just lacking last year. It's really incredible how he's revitalized his game from those years in Houston when he was dropping 35 a game. Now he's arguably the best playmaker in the NBA. I mean, he is the leading, I don't think he's leader for total assists, but he's the leader for the assist average.
Yeah.
So it's really remarkable what James has been able to do. And in terms of his fit alongside Joel Embiid, like it passes the eye test. The stats suggest that it's a dominant duo. And it took some time to get here. And we definitely saw that early on in the season. But credit to James Harden for just adapting, really suiting into this second kind of scorer, dominant playmaker role. He's had 2 20-assist games, which is ridiculous. And also credit to Joel Embiid, who is now leading the NBA, I believe, in rolling to the rim and attempts and rolling to the rim. So both of those players deserve credit for getting to where they are.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it because they kind of feed off of one another. I mean, James Harden probably gets 5 or 6 assists alone just from dump offs to Embiid off that pick and roll. So it's been amazing to watch. Any differences with James Harden aside from the playmaking? Obviously, how he's a just beside Embiid, but I feel like just from what I've been watching, I don't have stats to prove it behind it. It just looks like he's more engaged defensively. It looks like he's buying in to winning. And I feel like that, I don't want to say that's a difference from the rest of his career because I don't want to speak on his time in Houston. I'm not as detailed into that time to say, oh, he did this and that during that time. It was just always a renowned, maybe a casual take that he doesn't play defense or struggles on the defensive end of the ball. Any changes there, just even if it's just more effort in your eyes from what you're seeing? I guess the reason I asked that question, Harrison, I saw him go up to Paul Reed in that Milwaukee game on Saturday night, and maybe it was just the fact that Brook Lopez is in the game and Paul Reed needs to go guard the taller guy. But James Harden, it looked like he said to him, I'll take Giannis, you go hop on Brook Lopez, right? So what are your thoughts just on the defensive side of things for James Harden?
Yeah, I've always thought James kind of got an unfair reputation for his defense. He's not a lockdown defender. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Right.
But he's certainly capable of getting stops, getting steals, and he's also a good post defender, which you saw in that Milwaukee game. And I definitely, I'm glad you brought this up because I've kind of noticed that too, is he's not taking possessions off right now on defense. And that's, right. I mean, that's a good sign. That's showing he's not gassed. He's obviously doing a lot offensively in terms of scoring and passing. So that's what you want to see out of James Harden. And there's all that Houston smoke. I'll
Yeah.
let you decide whether or not that's real. I'm not gonna dive too much into that, but
Yeah.
like it's not like what it was during the end of his Brooklyn tenure. Like he's
Right.
not just floating out there. He is engaged. He's engaged with his teammates. Even in Minnesota, when he rested, he was on the bench, showing
Yeah.
support and everything. So yeah, I think James has gotten an unfair rep with his defense for sure, and I think it's passable. I don't think you can pick on him. There was another game, I think it was against the Pacers, where they tried to pick on him, and he got a few stops. So
Yeah.
when he's locked in and engaged, and hopefully this is the case, when these games really matter during the postseason, I think he's capable of getting a stop or two.
Yeah, and we don't have to dive into the Houston talk too much. I know from I had it on the list of questions just in that James Harden segment. It's more or less just for the people who listen. I don't care to talk about it too much because it just doesn't make sense with what they're doing, where they're at in the season right now. So we'll stay away from that for the most part here. Just to kind of end it off, and I feel like we've talked about just about everything. Maybe Embiid we missed on, and maybe that's something that we can add in at the end with this final question. But just as far as the rest of this season, what are your expectations for this Sixers team? Obviously, they're right where you thought they were, being the 3 seed as far as your beginning of season expectations. But where are your expectations at now, given the success they've had of late, given the way Harden and Embiid's relationship has matured on the court? What are your expectations, and how would you go about the final part of this season? I feel like you've kind of already insinuated how you would do it. But as far as resting Embiid, Harden, even PJ Tucker down the stretch, or are you going full blown after that 2 seed?
Yeah, so I think I'll answer the first half of your question, which was what are my expectations for where I want this team to go, just for the postseason. And I think they have enough talent that they should at least get to the conference finals. And I say that knowing that Boston is a really likely candidate to be their second round opponent. And
Yeah.
Boston, they've been kind of shaky. How much stock you want to put into their struggles as of late, I'll leave that up to you. I don't put too much stock in it.
Yeah.
But if you look at just the duo of Joel Embiid and James Harden, in a theoretical Boston matchup, you have the best player, and I would say you have the third best player. I think James Harden has been better than Jaylen Brown this year. Obviously, Boston has more depth, and they have wing talent that's a concern in a potential matchup. But just that duo alone should be enough to at least get you a conference finals berth. And I think they have a decent enough depth. Tyrese Maxey, especially if he's playing like how he's been playing,
Yeah.
they should be able to get there. So that is my expectation for them. I would be fairly disappointed if they don't get there, regardless of if it's Milwaukee, if it's Boston, whoever.
Yeah.
I think that is kind of the bar they need to get to. And if they don't get to that bar this year, I think there's going to be it's going to be an interesting summer for sure.
Yeah.
And then your second question, what was that again?
Yeah, so just as far as balancing out, and maybe that's just what it is, what would you do to end the season as far as resting Embiid, making sure that they're healthy enough once they get to the playoffs, versus going all out for the 2 seed, 1 seed, which I know you already said you don't think it's really possible, but let's just say 2 seed.
Yeah, so I think that if you ask the players, if you ask someone like James Harden, Joel Embiid, they're going to want to go for that 2 seed.
Yeah.
But the stats show that I think this has changed since I last looked into it, but I know at least 3 of James's 30-point performances came from an extended absence off. And I think there's legitimate stock in that. So if it was up to me, I'd definitely rest James for, I want to say, a week before the postseason. It probably won't be that much. It'll probably just be like the last game or 2.
Yeah.
And with Joel, it's a little bit trickier. I think that you could get away with playing Joel for like maybe the first half, not all 24 minutes, but just to have him keep his rhythm going into the postseason. Managing those guys is going to be really important. And also not just James and Joel, but I think you got to manage PJ Tucker, Tyrese Maxey too. You want to keep him fresh because he's balling out right now. You don't want him to burn out.
Yeah.
So I think load management, and I know everybody hates that word, is going to be really important over these next few weeks.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds like you got the right mindset going into this latter part of the year. My main thing, honestly, I just want to see Embiid, Harden, obviously the other guys as well. PJ, we need to keep our eyes on him, but making sure Embiid and Harden are fully healthy going into the playoffs is huge for me, especially Embiid, man. Because we haven't gotten to see it. We haven't gotten to see what that really looks like fully healthy in the postseason if he can take it up to another level. We got a preview in that Raptors series last year, and obviously, unfortunate what happened with Siakam, but it's exciting, man. I'm glad I got to kind of preview this latter stage of the NBA season for the Sixers, and you got me excited, man. I think we have some high points to look for in this season and look out for between this duo that we have here in Embiid and Harden, and I really can't wait to see them in the postseason. Let's hope they finish strong. But Harrison, thank you so much for joining the show. Guys, if you're watching out there, be sure to check out Harrison at Harrison_Grimm. It's right there on the screen for you. Make sure to check him out on Twitter. Give him a follow. You're going to get a bunch of nice tidbits, nice stats. He keeps me in the loop completely, and I appreciate you for that, Harrison.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, man. Really appreciate it.
Hey, anytime, anytime. I hope to chat with you soon. Maybe when playoffs come back around, we can link up again, man. I appreciate it once again.
Sure, I'm down. Let's do it.
Awesome, Harrison. Have a great rest of your day, brother.
Thank you. You too.
Peace. All right, guys. So that was Harrison Grimm of the Liberty Ballers of SB Nation. Be sure to check him out at Harrison_Grimm. As we mentioned, it is on the screen, rolling on the ticker there at the bottom. But guys, that's going to be it for this episode of Scotty Talks NBA. I hope you enjoyed my very special guest. And be sure to check me out on Friday. I will be live again, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on DSM Media. We'll break down the full slate of action that has transpired throughout this week of the NBA. But guys, have a great rest of your evening. We don't have any Sixers basketball all the way until Friday evening against the Portland Trailblazers. They come back here to Philadelphia. So we'll be back with Sixers pregame as well. On behalf of DSM Media, for Harrison Grimm, for myself at Scotty Drown, have a great rest of your evening, everybody, and go Sixers.